Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mariëtte.
Good afternoon, and this is Elzahn sitting next to me. Today we're going to talk about a matriculant, the final exam that they play, external exams, we as teachers, what we observed this year, and what your time frame is. First of all, you need to get the student so that it's not a mechanical performance. The musician needs to be an all-rounder. It will take 1.5 years for the preparation, and one needs to have a real musician that can communicate the music, understands the music, and it's not just playing the notes and coordinate it with your accompanist. You need to communicate that with the audience. That is the right time for the person, the student, to do their grade 8 exam. And it must have your own input, flavor, and that is what is needed.
Definitely. So, by preparing your student for a grade 8 or a final matric exam, how do you know when they're ready, say, to play a grade 8 practical exam?
First of all, when the student is in grade 6, that's when you must have a sort of long-term plan where you can identify what their strengths are, and if they have weaknesses, how you can fix it by, if they don't like a specific composer, you can get another composer of the same period, but that will have the same or will fix the same problems, and it's usually bowing or it's technique problems, and that's usually why they don't want to play a specific piece.
So to when choosing pieces, what is important for you to look at? What I normally look at is choosing idiomatic keys for the violin. So I would lean towards A majors and D minors and F majors, and keys that's naturally comfortable for finger frames on the violin, and then also not having every piece the same time signature. I don't know how you chose your students' pieces.
Yeah, when they get to grade 6 and 7, you want them to be exposed to as many pieces as possible, that they also can understand where the pieces come from, historically, politically, why it was written, what is the overall structure of it, what is the harmonic structure of it. Usually one wants to start off just fixing the technical problems page by page, and then afterwards they must then understand it by doing some research of listening to different violinists playing it, and also, so I think the important thing is that the student needs to also get to the accompanist as soon as possible. That doesn't always happen in the practice, and obviously in 2020 there are ways that you can get music -1 or an audio file of for instance, ABRS have it, and you can buy it. And for instance, I have a student in Zambia stuck there, and she had to play her grade 2nd term exam playing with the file, which was quite difficult because there is the person is not in the room with you, and if you have rallentandos or accelerandos or difficult or opposing rhythms, then it's quite difficult to put that together.
To just slot in what you just said, with some of my matric students, what we did, we had a studio discussion about how they practice and what they find is difficult, and how they learn pieces. What do they do first? They unpack the instrument, and then they do what? They do technical first, they do this. And I think they benefited so much from just hearing each other's struggles and just finding a common ground and seeing, oh my goodness, you're also struggling with that piece, and oh, it's a Baroque piece, and just finding out about the history of the piece, which I think in a lesson one-on-one gets lost, because the teacher normally spends a lot of time on fixing technique and nitpicking things, and then certain things get lost. So I think it's important. When I was in school, we did viva voce, where you had to present your research on your pieces, and you'd have to go and read up, and I mean, you could go and just copy and paste, but the idea behind it is very valuable, that you actually learn what is this piece that you are playing, who was it originally written for, and so definitely worth doing for students.
One can also just add with two-set violins, they sometimes do quite interesting topics of how violin sound has changed in the past 40 or 60 years. And then because it's something which they then get drawn into, going down the rabbit hole of watching some more two-set violin videos, and that might just spark them to practice more.
Then also, Mariëtte, I was thinking about you were talking about practicing.
Okay, practicing techniques. I think one should spend some time on it, because your students don't have as much time as we used to. I don't know why, but if you now only have, say, 14 minutes or 15 minutes, what are you going to practice? What are you going to spend the time on? So there are techniques of where you start at the end of the piece, and then you go back and play, so that you don't play all of the first few lines all the time until you make a mistake, and then you go back to the beginning. Or you can do specific rhythms. Metronome practicing is actually not bad.
No.
So one needs to chat to them, to your students, of how to be incredibly productive, because as if they get into the Franschhoek Chamber Music Festival, or the Stellenbosch International Chamber Music Festival, then they get their excerpt music, but sometimes just a week in advance, and then they have to come and present that and do an audition, which I think is also very, very good for performance of your pieces, so that they are then ready for the exam. The excerpts, and it's usually the most difficult of, say, a symphony, or whether it's a concerto, that they have to play in the orchestra and accompany, and also be together, and also playing the amount of hours that they usually don't spend on their instruments. That's also a wonderful extra.
Yes. I'm going to just briefly touch on my experience that I've had with Trinity this year. They obviously didn't expect the year to go as it went. So they had exams in the beginning of the year, and then the middle of the year, and then at the end of the year. And then they cancelled, they put it on hold. And then by June, they sent an email, and the children and the kids, if you were entered for the exam, you could basically submit a recording, which it's a whole digital rabbit hole if you're not very comfortable with computers. So the kids obviously then were still at home in lockdown, so the kids had to upload their video of their technical and their 3 pieces, and it's basically not exactly the same structure as a normal Trinity exam. But what I found was, obviously, if you're at home and you have a phone or an iPad, depending on what kind of phone you have, the quality is not always good. So you'll have a child that has been practicing for months and months, and now they have to their marks depend on how good a recording is. So I would recommend schools to maybe invest in a good quality microphone that you can mount on a DSLR or a video camera. If a school does have one, it's definitely worth investing in, not just for music, but I think going forward, many of these ABRSM and UNISA and Trinity, not knowing what the future holds, might go the digital route or have that as an option, which I think is great because it's more inclusive and it just enables more people to enter exams and for a certain type of child, and it's really a good experience, and it really pushes you and it's to set goals. So I think it would be good if you invest in a good camera and a microphone so that the kids have the best advantage possible.
Yes, and as you say, the kids must also be exposed to it, so they should actually start recording themselves more.
Absolutely.
For instance, on the list of the matriculant, there was a chamber music work, and it's a quartet from Alan Stevenson, and we were in hard lockdown, so one needed to make a copy or a recording of the instruments that she was not going to play, and that was the second violin, viola, and cello, and so I basically did that, and the cello part I played on the piano, so that, and they could send each other their parts, and basically then had a discussion about what the tempo should be or shouldn't be, and yes. So it is important that not only so that they really start listening to what they sound like, and also then they can deviate and change things and with confidence, because they've listened to themselves a few times, and be very critical.
What I found in lockdown is, I mean, leaving school in March, we had no idea that this was coming, so we couldn't really prepare for it. But what I found is we've kind of evolved and become so clever to kind of meet our students where they are and use whatever means possible to make music possible, which is, I think, incredible. I mean, I think we've learned what all these limitations, and it was horrible being, in lockdown, but I think as teachers we've become just that extra bit cleverer, more clever, that we are, we're using, like for instance, I teach matric music, so I've used MuseScore to help them to practice their oral, and I play the tracks that they have to listen to, or videos that we need to watch as a class together through, Google Classroom. It's just, I think it's amazing what we've done.
I also just would like to mention, it was quite in the beginning, and I think that your students were very emotionally, they didn't know where they were, and that you organized an interview with somebody in New York.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the idea was just to kind of reach out of our little pond here in South Africa and hear how people are doing it in the States. So I asked Dr. Nicola Mason and Weston Sprott, who is the dean at Juilliard, to basically just have a conversation with our students, and it was just so enlightening for them to hear, oh my goodness, people thousands of kilometers away are having exactly the same frustrations, and they spoke to them about planning your future and just being realistic in this unrealistic world that we were in this year. So I think that was very beneficial for them.
Yes, and if anybody wanted to watch that,
we'll drop it in the link below the video.
I thought that it was extremely positive, of that the world is not going to end right now, and there's nothing that you can now do. You can only just spend time on your instrument and get better. Yeah, I think that was wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for doing that. I think to get back to the grade 8, the program that I chose, one has to choose it, say, 2 years in advance, because if you don't have the music, then it needs to be ordered. So it's quite a tough one. It's the Beethoven Spring Sonata, it's the Kabalevsky Violin Concerto, first 2 movements, and the Fritz Kreisler Preludium and Allegro. So obviously, as a teacher myself, I had to also go and practice it again to see where the difficult bits are, and also troubleshooting it for myself, so that I can fix it, and then it's easier, or it's will be more beneficial for her, and she will obviously have other difficulties that I probably might not have. And it is also very, very good practicing so that you can perform it for your student. And I think one needs to also remember to talk to them about how to handle it when you are stressing while standing on stage. I have stage fright, and there are ways and means of just coping with that and going through it. And also, the world is not going to end if you make a mistake. It's you are still here.
We're here. So another thing that I am talking about, everything electronic, things that we normally don't think of, especially when we're teaching young students, is just you kind of put off teaching them how to tune their own instrument. So sometimes you think a little bit older, so you wait, and now this lockdown has proved to us that you need to teach them how, and invite parents for a one-on-one lesson where you have a how-to, and you show them and make a video and you put it in a drive, and so that they can go back. Because now this lockdown, there's been how many strings that have been broken, and kids, and how to go on and kind of improvise. Okay, you don't have an A string, we work with the other three that you have. Which is, devastating when you have nowhere to go. But you kind of have to improvise and just go on and do your thing.
And also, I had a student, and her D was quite suspect, and we couldn't literally not move it. So, having perfect pitch, if you start playing a G and then you have a D, and then so her D string actually was a C. And I had to just tune on my instrument, and I used to say to them, remind me in the beginning of the lesson, so we don't tune 2 or 3 other strings, and then we get, but you are the disastrous D string kid. Okay.
And then another thing that I've picked up with young students is we now have to, something that you would show a student, now you have to explain, and the younger they are, you lose them in half a minute. So
especially with buffering as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't want to say, I didn't hear what you said.
So they'll just look at you, and then there's that moment, and then by the time you back to, this is how you hold the bow, and this is how I want you to, then they're gone. So you have to condense what you were planning to say so that they can still get the knowledge and get what they're supposed to do, and not lose the whole plot, basically.
To get back to external examinations, the last thing I want to talk about is actually sight reading. Sight reading or quick study, depends whether it's UNISA or Trinity or ABRSM. Get your kids to play in orchestras. That is how they learn how to just on the spot sight read. And the music will show them sort of where they're going. Plus, it's not they're not alone. Their friends are there, and they're in the same deep waters trying to swim. It's Renee van den Berg, who I spoke to, also talks about situated learning or experiential learning, and that is where you get confronted with something and you just have to cope. And that's basically,
that's valuable.
Yeah, and also it's fun getting not just practicing on your own. You can chat with your friends. You actually get to know your musical peers from all over South Africa, because sometimes they have music camps, and also then that's when you can start with a duo or a trio, or and just play some more music than just your 3 pieces and the rest of it.
Yeah, jeez. Lastly, I just want to talk briefly about the three online websites that can be very beneficial. Your online pianist is it basically has recordings of all your Trinity pieces. Mariëtte said that on the ABRSM website they also have recorded backtracks basically of the pieces. Your online pianist, you can set, or you can buy the tracks. You can either choose to have it the instrument that just the instrument or the accompaniment. And you can also change the speeds, which is so important if they've got nothing to practice with and they don't know what the accompaniment sounds, especially with the more advanced pieces. You want them to know what's going on in the piano part, and you want them to sit with the piano part and say, oh, it's that, what's going on there. So that is a very valuable website. It's not too expensive and definitely worthwhile if we're going to do another digital session. I don't know, depending on what happens next year. And then Scribd is a subscription that you pay. There's lots of books and resources and pages of music and theory. Lots of music resources on there, which is a great thing to have when you're at home and you can't go to the library, or you don't can't go and copy your books, or your stuff is in your classroom and you can't access it. So scribd.com, and then also MuseScore, which is a free download where you can basically write music and you can use it to explain theory, and it's a really big help, especially in classroom setting. And then also you can buy a subscription which is $7, where you can download pieces, full like piano and violin pieces, and then you can also have a MP3 so they can listen to it as well. And then YouTube, the world of YouTube.
But don't know who to.
Oh.
Ask your teachers who they should go and listen to, and not a 5-year-old Korean that can play. So no. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to us. It's been a pleasure being part of the String Convention.
Yes, definitely. I hope we're here in person next year.